I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The moment I held baby Marcus in my arms, I knew he was meant to be my son. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine as if promising we'd never let go of each other. The adoption papers were just formalities. In my heart, we already belonged together. "You sure about this, Eleanor?" my brother Jerome had asked that day at the agency. "Raising a child alone after James's passing won't be easy." "James may have died serving his country," I'd replied, "but I'm still here to honor his memory. This child needs a mother, and I need someone to love." That was 45 years ago. I never regretted my decision, not even today as I sit on my porch watching the sunset, wondering where I went wrong with the son I raised with all my heart. My name is Eleanor Washington. I'm 74 years old, and until recently, I believed I understood what family meant. This house has been my sanctuary for nearly 4 decades. I purchased it with the military pension I received after Lieutenant Colonel James Washington, my husband of 8 years, was killed in action. What Marcus doesn't know, what I have never told him, is that this home is just one of 3 properties I own. James was not only brave, but financially prudent. He purchased 2 additional properties as investments before his deployment, and over the years I've maintained them as rental units. Between my military widow's pension, those rental incomes, and decades of careful saving, I've accumulated $245,000 in my savings account. I never flaunted my financial security. I wanted Marcus to develop a strong work ethic, to understand the value of earning his own way. Perhaps that was my mistake, letting him believe we were just getting by when in reality, I had secured our future. The phone rings inside, interrupting my thoughts. "Hi, Mom," Marcus says, his voice carrying that slightly strained quality it's had since he married Vanessa 10 years ago. "Just checking if we're still on for dinner tomorrow." "Of course, sweetheart. I'm making your favorite pot roast." "Great. Vanessa says not to use too much salt this time." I bite my tongue. "I'll keep that in mind." After hanging up, I sink deeper into my rocking chair, my heart heavy with unspoken words. There was a time when Marcus would talk to me for hours about his dreams and fears. Now our conversations feel like obligatory check-ins, cold and distant. Tomorrow will be different, I tell myself. Tomorrow, I'll reconnect with my son. I first met Vanessa Cooper at a neighborhood barbecue. Marcus brought her over, beaming with happiness I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Mom, this is Vanessa," he said, arm wrapped protectively around her waist. "Vanessa, this is my mother, Eleanor." She was undeniably beautiful, tall with honey blonde hair and a dazzling smile. But when she shook my hand, her eyes assessed me with a calculating coldness that sent a chill down my spine. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Eleanor," she said. "Marcus has told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, trying to warm the space between us. "Oh, he's very devoted to his mommy," she laughed, the sound carrying an edge. "It's sweet." That evening, as I watched them from across the lawn, I saw how she commanded attention, steering Marcus away from his old friends toward the wealthier couples in the neighborhood. I tried to dismiss my unease as the natural wariness of a mother seeing her son fall in love. What I didn't know then was that Vanessa carried deep wounds from her childhood. Years later, during a rare, vulnerable moment after too much wine, she confessed her parents had been abusive alcoholics who eventually abandoned her to foster care. "I promised myself I'd never be poor or powerless again," she told me, her eyes hard even through the haze of alcohol. "No one will ever control me like they did." If I'd understood the depth of her fear earlier, I might have recognized the warning signs. But by the time I realized the truth about Vanessa's need for control and financial security, she had already sunk her roots deeply into my son's heart. 6 months after meeting, Marcus proposed. A year later, they married in a lavish ceremony that cost more than he could afford, but Vanessa insisted on nothing less. I contributed what I could without revealing my finances, watching with growing unease as my son took out loans to satisfy his new wife's expensive tastes. The changes in Marcus happened gradually. First, phone calls became less frequent. Then, Sunday dinners at my house dwindled from weekly to monthly to whenever we can fit it in, Mom. When they did visit, I noticed how Marcus would look to Vanessa before speaking, gauging her reactions before offering his opinions. "Vanessa thinks we should invest in cryptocurrency," he told me one day. "Is that what you think too?" I asked. He blinked as if the question confused him. "Well, yeah, she's really smart about money." The comment stung. I had managed our finances alone for decades, put Marcus through college without debt, and maintained 3 properties. Yet somehow my financial acumen was invisible to him. 3 years into their marriage, they moved into my house temporarily while saving for a down payment on their own place. The weeks stretched into months, then years. Vanessa began redecorating, replacing my comfortable old furniture with modern pieces that left no room for memories. "This place could use some updating, don't you think, Eleanor?" she would say, eyeing my treasured family photos or the quilt James's mother had made for our wedding. I gave in more often than not, retreating to my bedroom as the house around me transformed into a space I barely recognized. It was still my name on the deed, but Vanessa had staked her claim on every corner. And Marcus? He became her echo, her shadow. The independent, thoughtful boy I raised seemed to disappear a little more each day. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I first overheard Vanessa on the phone, her voice carrying from the kitchen while she thought I was grocery shopping. I had forgotten my list and returned quietly through the back door. "She's becoming more difficult every day," Vanessa was saying, her voice low but clear. "Always hovering, always with her opinions about how Marcus and I should live our lives." A pause. "Well, of course she has that military pension, but it's barely enough to cover her medications. Marcus says there's no substantial savings, just this house, which honestly needs so much work, it's barely an asset." Another pause. "I know, right? We can't keep living with his mother forever. Marcus needs to man up and have that conversation with her about assisted living. She's getting too old to maintain this place anyway." I froze in the hallway, my grocery list forgotten in my trembling hand. Assisted living? I was perfectly capable of caring for myself and my home. I exercised daily, volunteered at the community center twice weekly, and had just started Spanish classes at the local college. Yes, I took blood pressure medication, but that hardly made me an invalid. Before Vanessa could discover me, I slipped back out the door, my heart pounding. In my car, I let the tears come. When had my son's wife started plotting to remove me from my own home? That evening at dinner, I watched them closely. Vanessa was all smiles, asking about my day with feigned interest, while Marcus sat quietly, pushing food around his plate. "Is everything okay, Marcus?" I asked. "You've barely touched your dinner." Before he could answer, Vanessa jumped in. "He's just tired, Eleanor. Work has been so stressful lately." She placed her hand over his. "I've been telling him he needs to take better care of himself. Men his age need to watch their health." "I'm fine, Mom," Marcus mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Later that week, I caught Vanessa going through my desk drawer where I kept financial documents. "Oh!" she exclaimed, not quite managing to look embarrassed. "I was just looking for a stamp. Marcus needs to mail something." "The stamps are in the kitchen drawer," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "They always have been." "Right, silly me," she laughed, closing the drawer. "By the way, Eleanor, I've been meaning to ask, Have you considered what you might do if this house becomes too much for you? My friend's mother moved into the most lovely retirement community last year. She says it's like living in a resort. I met her gaze steadily. I appreciate your concern, Vanessa, but I'm perfectly happy here. This is my home. Something flashed in her eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or determination. Of course, but it never hurts to plan ahead. That night, I called Jerome for the first time in months. My brother had retired as a general after 35 years of military service, and we'd always been close, though his frequent relocations kept us from seeing each other as often as we'd like. "It's been too long, Ellie," he said warmly. "How are you doing? How's Marcus?" I hesitated, reluctant to voice my fears. "I'm fine, but I'm worried about Marcus. Since he married Vanessa, he's changed." "Changed how?" Jerome's voice took on the sharp focus I remembered from our childhood, when he'd protected me from neighborhood bullies. "He's distant. Sometimes it feels like he's avoiding me in my own house. And Vanessa," I trailed off, unsure how to explain my suspicions without sounding like a jealous mother-in-law. "What about her?" Jerome pressed. "She's been asking questions about my finances, suggesting I consider assisted living. Jerome, I think she wants my house." There was a long silence. "Have you told Marcus how you feel?" "I've tried, but he doesn't hear me anymore. It's like he's under her spell." "Do you want me to talk to him?" Jerome offered. "No," I said quickly. "Not yet. Maybe I'm overreacting." "You've always had good instincts, Ellie. If something feels off, it probably is. I'm stationed in Colorado now, but I can be there in a day if you need me. Just say the word." "I'll be fine," I assured him, though the knot in my stomach suggested otherwise. After hanging up, I sat in darkness, listening to Marcus and Vanessa's muffled voices downstairs. There was a time when my son would have defended me against anyone who tried to hurt me. Now I wondered if he would even notice if I disappeared. Over the next weeks, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Vanessa became more bold in suggesting I might be happier somewhere else, while Marcus became more withdrawn. I noticed them having hushed arguments that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. One morning I came downstairs to find Marcus looking stressed, his coffee untouched. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "Do you have any extra money this month? We're a bit short on the car payment." Before I could respond, Vanessa walked in. "Marcus, I told you not to bother your mother with that," she said, but the sharp look she gave him told a different story. "It's no bother," I said. "How much do you need?" $300, he mumbled. "Just until my next paycheck." I wrote him a check, noticing how Vanessa's eyes followed my movements as I took my checkbook from my purse. This wasn't the first time they'd asked for money. Small amounts at first, then gradually larger sums. I'd always given without question, wanting to help my son. What I didn't know, what I would discover later, was that Marcus had lost his job at the architecture firm 3 months earlier. He'd been too ashamed to tell me, and Vanessa had convinced him to keep it secret while he looked for another position. They were in much deeper financial trouble than I realized. That afternoon, I overheard another of Vanessa's phone conversations, this one more disturbing than the last. "We need to accelerate the plan," she was saying urgently. "His savings are almost gone, and I can't keep pretending to go to work every day. Eleanor has to have money somewhere. No one lives this modestly when they have options." A chill ran down my spine. What plan was she talking about? "Yes, I've checked her desk, but there's nothing there except pension statements." Vanessa continued. "I'm telling you, she's hiding something. Nobody saves every penny of a military pension for decades without building a nest egg." As I listened, frozen in place, the truth hit me with stunning clarity. Vanessa wasn't just irritated by living with her mother-in-law. She was actively hunting for my money, and she had dragged my son into her scheme. That night, I moved all my important documents from my desk to a safety deposit box at the bank. I called my longtime lawyer, Walter Freeman, and updated my will, making sure it would be ironclad against any attempts to contest it. I didn't want to believe my own son could betray me, but I needed to protect myself just in case. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about calling Jerome again, telling him everything. But some stubborn part of me wanted to handle this myself, to believe that Marcus would eventually see through Vanessa's manipulations. He was my son, after all. Surely the values I'd raised him with would eventually reassert themselves. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. The morning of the confrontation dawned bright and clear, with no hint of the storm brewing inside my house. I was making breakfast when Marcus and Vanessa came into the kitchen, both dressed as if for an important meeting. "Mom, we need to talk," Marcus said, his voice flat and rehearsed. "Can you sit down for a minute?" I wiped my hands on a dish towel, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. Of course. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had helped Marcus with his homework, where we had celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where I had comforted him through his first heartbreak. Now it felt like a barrier between us. "Mom, Vanessa and I have been talking," Marcus began, staring at his hands instead of meeting my eyes. "We think it might be time for you to consider alternative living arrangements." "Alternative living arrangements," I repeated, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "What exactly does that mean?" Vanessa leaned forward, her expression a mask of false concern. "Eleanor, we're worried about you. This house is too big for you to manage alone, and your health isn't getting any better." "My health is fine," I said firmly. "And I'm not alone. You two live here too." "That's just it, Mom," Marcus said, finally looking at me. "Vanessa and I need our own space. We're thinking about starting a family, and I'm in the way?" I finished for him. "It's not like that," he protested weakly, but we both knew it was exactly like that. "We've been researching some wonderful assisted living facilities," Vanessa continued smoothly. "St. Catherine's has an excellent reputation. They have activities, medical staff on site, and you'd be with people your own age." "I have friends my own age," I said. "I see them every week at my volunteer work, at my Spanish class, at church. I don't need to be institutionalized to have a social life." Vanessa's smile tightened. "No one is talking about institutionalizing you, Eleanor. We're talking about a community where you'd be taken care of." "I can take care of myself," I said, my voice sharper now. "And in case you've forgotten, this is my house. My name is on the deed. I paid for it with my husband's military pension. I've maintained it for 38 years. If anyone should be considering alternative living arrangements, it's you two." Marcus looked shocked, as if the thought had never occurred to him. "Mom, we're just trying to help." "Are you?" I asked, turning to him. "Or are you letting your wife push me out of my own home because it's easier than standing up to her?" "Don't talk to him like that," Vanessa snapped, dropping the concerned act. "He's a grown man who deserves to have his own life without being tied to his mother's apron strings." "I have never held him back," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I've supported every decision he's made, including marrying you, which I'm beginning to think was his biggest mistake." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping." "You're right," I agreed, standing up. "This conversation is over. I'm not moving anywhere, and that's final." As I turned to leave the kitchen, Vanessa called after me. "It's not that simple, Eleanor. We've already put down a deposit at St. Catherine's. They're expecting you next week." I froze, then turned back slowly. "You did what?" Marcus at least had the decency to look ashamed. "It's just a deposit, Mom. We can get it back if I don't cooperate with your plan to ship me off to a home," I finished, my voice trembling with anger now. How dare you make decisions about my life without even consulting me? We've been trying to talk to you about this for months, Vanessa insisted. You're just too stubborn to listen to reason. Reason? I echoed. Is that what you call going behind my back to arrange my future without my consent? Mom, please, Marcus pleaded. Just go visit the place. You might actually like it. I'm not going anywhere, I repeated firmly. This discussion is over. I left the kitchen, my legs shaking so badly I nearly stumbled. In my bedroom, I locked the door and sank onto the edge of my bed, trying to catch my breath. How had it come to this? How had my own son turned against me so completely? As I sat there, my phone rang. It was Walter Freeman, my lawyer. Eleanor, I'm glad I caught you, he said. There's something concerning I need to tell you. Someone tried to access information about your properties this morning. My blood ran cold. What kind of information? Ownership details, mortgage status, estimated values. They claim to be acting on your behalf, and I know I don't have any requests from you for that information. Who was it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A woman named Vanessa Washington. She said she was your daughter-in-law and had your authorization. I closed my eyes, a wave of betrayal washing over me. She doesn't have my authorization for anything, Walter. Thank you for checking with me. Eleanor, is everything all right? Do you need help? I hesitated, torn between pride and pragmatism. I might. Can you come by this afternoon? I think I need to update some legal protections. After hanging up, I sat in silence, trying to process the depth of Vanessa's deception. Was Marcus a willing participant, or just a pawn in her game? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Mom? Marcus called. Can we please talk about this? I opened the door to find my son looking distressed. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Marcus, why are you doing this? I asked quietly. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. It's complicated, Mom. Vanessa thinks... I'm not asking what Vanessa thinks, I interrupted. I'm asking what you think. Do you really want to send your mother to a nursing home? It's not a nursing home, he protested weakly. It's assisted living. That's semantics, and you know it. Answer the question, Marcus. Is this what you want? He couldn't meet my eyes. I want what's best for everyone. Best for everyone or best for Vanessa? Before he could answer, Vanessa appeared behind him. Marcus, I told you this wouldn't work. She's too stubborn to see reason. Stop talking about me as if I'm not here, I said firmly. This is my house, and I'm not leaving it. Vanessa's expression hardened. We'll see about that. The threat in her voice sent a chill down my spine. What does that mean? It means that one way or another, this situation is going to change, she replied coldly. Marcus deserves better than to spend his life catering to his elderly mother. I have never asked him to cater to me, I said, my anger rising. I've been supporting both of you for years, financially and emotionally. You live in my house rent-free. I pay for most of the groceries. I even helped with your car payment last month. Those are just small contributions compared to what parents should do for their children, Vanessa retorted. And what about what children should do for their parents? I asked, looking directly at Marcus. Honor thy father and mother. Isn't that one of the commandments you used to recite in Sunday school? Marcus looked pained. Mom, it's not that I don't honor you. We need our own space. Then find your own space, I said simply. But it won't be this house. Vanessa grabbed Marcus's arm. Come on, this is pointless. She's not going to listen to reason. As they turned to leave, I called after my son. Marcus, Walter Freeman is coming by this afternoon. You remember him, my lawyer? He had some interesting news about someone trying to get information about my properties today. Vanessa froze for just a second before pulling Marcus down the hallway. It was all the confirmation I needed. I spent the morning in a daze, moving mechanically through routines while my mind raced. I needed to call Jerome, tell him everything, but something held me back. Perhaps it was pride, or maybe the lingering hope that Marcus would come to his senses without outside intervention. Walter arrived at 2 o'clock, his familiar presence a comfort amid chaos. "Eleanor, I'm concerned," he said after I explained the situation. "These are classic signs of elder financial exploitation. Your daughter-in-law is clearly targeting your assets, and I'm afraid your son may be complicit, willingly or not." "What can I do?" I asked. "First, secure all important documents. Update your will. Consider setting up a trust with clear conditions. And most importantly, don't sign anything they put in front of you without consulting me first." We spent the next hour updating my legal protections. As Walter was leaving, he paused at the door. "Eleanor, do you have somewhere else you can stay if things get worse here?" The question caught me off guard. I haven't thought about it. This is my home." He nodded grimly. "I understand. But keep that option in mind. Sometimes strategic retreat is the wisest course of action." After he left, I sat in my living room looking at family photos on the mantel. There was Marcus on his first bicycle, beaming with pride. Marcus in his cap and gown at graduation. Marcus and me at the Grand Canyon, his arm around my shoulders. When had that loving boy turned into a man who would conspire to push his mother out of her home? I was still sitting there when I heard the front door open and unfamiliar male voices in the hallway. Moments later, Marcus appeared, flanked by 2 burly men in work clothes. "Mom," he said, his voice eerily calm. "These gentlemen are here to help you pack." "Pack for what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "For your move to St. Catherine's," Vanessa answered, appearing behind them. "Your room will be ready tomorrow morning." I stood up, drawing myself to my full height. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house, and I did not invite these men inside." "Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be," Marcus pleaded. "I'm not making anything hard," I replied. "I'm simply stating a fact. I am not leaving my home." Vanessa stepped forward, her eyes cold. "Eleanor, be reasonable. You can't stay here alone, and we need our space." "Then you leave," I said firmly. "Find your own space." "That's not how this is going to work," she said, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You're going to pack your essentials and come with us to St. Catherine's tomorrow. The rest of your things will be put in storage." "And if I refuse?" I challenged. "Then we'll pack for you," she replied. "Gentlemen, please start in the bedroom. Mrs. Washington won't be needing much. The facility is fully furnished." As the men moved toward the stairs, I blocked their path. "Stop right there. This is breaking and entering. I did not give permission to enter my home or touch my belongings." One man hesitated, looking uncertainly at Marcus. "Sir, is there some kind of dispute here? We were told this was a planned move." Before Marcus could answer, I spoke up. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. I have not agreed to any move, and I am not giving permission to touch my belongings." "Ma'am, we don't want any trouble," the man said, backing away slightly. Vanessa made a sound of frustration. "Eleanor, stop being difficult. Marcus, tell them it's fine." Marcus looked torn, shifting uncomfortably. "Mom, please, just cooperate. This is for the best." "Is it?" I asked, looking directly at him. "Is this really what you want, Marcus? To force your mother out of her own home against her will?" For a moment, I thought I saw doubt in his eyes. Then Vanessa stepped between us. "Enough of this drama. We've already paid for the facility. Your medication has been transferred to their pharmacy. Everything is arranged." "You had no right to do any of that," I said, my voice rising with anger. We had every right, Vanessa snapped back. You're clearly not capable of making rational decisions anymore. Is that your professional medical opinion? I asked sarcastically. Because last I checked, you worked in sales, not geriatric medicine. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. Marcus, I told you this wouldn't work. She's too stubborn for her own good. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Mom, please. We're just trying to help. No, you're not, I said sadly. You're trying to get rid of me. The two workers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Look, man, one said to Marcus, we don't do family disputes. Call us back when everyone's on the same page. They headed for the door, but Vanessa blocked their path. You've been paid to do a job. Do it. Sorry, lady, the other worker said. No amount of money is worth getting involved in this mess. We're out. After they left, we stood in tense silence. Finally, Vanessa turned to Marcus. I told you we should have done this ourselves. Go get some boxes from the garage. To my horror, Marcus obeyed, leaving me alone with Vanessa. Why are you doing this? I asked her quietly. For a moment, her mask slipped, revealing the desperation beneath. Because we have nothing, she hissed. Your precious son lost his job 3 months ago. We're drowning in debt. This house is the only asset we have access to, and we can't sell it with you still in it. The revelation confirmed my suspicions, but it didn't justify their actions. That doesn't give you the right to throw me out of my own home. Your home? She laughed bitterly. You're 74, Eleanor. You've had your life. It's our turn now. Marcus returned with several flattened cardboard boxes. These should be enough to start with, he said, avoiding my gaze. Marcus, stop this, I pleaded. Think about what you're doing. He began assembling a box, his movements mechanical. It's already decided, Mom. The deposit is paid. They're expecting you tomorrow. And if I refuse to go? Vanessa smirked. Then we'll call for a medical evaluation. How long do you think it will take us to convince a doctor that you're no longer capable of living independently? Your occasional forgetfulness, your stubbornness, your refusal to accept help, all signs of cognitive decline. I felt a chill at the calculated cruelty of her threat. She had clearly thought this through, planned for every contingency. You wouldn't dare, I whispered. Try me, she challenged, her eyes hard. Marcus moved toward my bedroom with the assembled box. I'll start with your clothes, Mom. Just the essentials for now. As he disappeared up the stairs, Vanessa's smirk widened. You raised such an obedient son, Eleanor. He always does exactly what I tell him to. The taunt ignited something in me, a fierce, protective rage that burned away my shock and disbelief. This woman had poisoned my son against me, manipulated him into betraying his own mother, and now she was gloating about it. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table. You've gone too far, Vanessa. This ends now. What are you going to do, call the police? She scoffed. And tell them what? That your son and his wife want you to move into a luxury retirement community? They'll laugh at you. I'm not calling the police, I said, dialing a number I knew by heart. I'm calling my brother. Vanessa's confident expression faltered slightly. Your brother? The one in Colorado who you haven't seen in years? The very same, I confirmed as the phone began to ring. General Jerome Thompson, United States Army, retired, and unlike some people, he understands the meaning of family loyalty. Before Vanessa could respond, I heard Jerome's voice on the line. Ellie, is everything okay? No, Jerome, it's not, I said, my voice finally breaking. I need your help. Marcus and his wife are trying to force me out of my home. They've already paid for a room at an assisted living facility. They're packing my things right now. What? Jerome's voice sharpened with alarm. Put Marcus on the phone. He's upstairs packing my clothes, I said. the absurdity of the situation hitting me anew. They hired movers, but the men refused to get involved when they realized I wasn't willing to go. "I'm on my way," Jerome said firmly. "I can be there by tomorrow morning. Can you hold them off until then?" "I'll try," I promised, relief washing over me. "Listen to me, Ellie," Jerome said, his voice deadly serious. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to go anywhere, even just to look. And if they try to physically remove you from the house, call 911 immediately. What they're doing is illegal." "I understand," I said. "I'll call you when my flight lands. Stay strong, little sister." After hanging up, I turned to find Vanessa watching me with narrowed eyes. "General Jerome Thompson," she repeated slowly. "Your brother is a general?" "Retired," I corrected, feeling a small surge of satisfaction at her discomfort. "But once a general, always a general, as they say in the service." Before she could respond, we heard a crash from upstairs, followed by Marcus's voice. "Mom? Where do you keep your jewelry?" Vanessa's expression shifted instantly from concern to calculation. "Marcus, check her bedside drawer," she called up. I moved quickly toward the stairs, but Vanessa blocked my path. "Stay out of the way, Eleanor. This will go much faster if you cooperate." "That jewelry belonged to my mother," I said, trying to push past her. "Some of it was given to me by James before he died. It's all I have left of them. And it will be much safer in our custody than at some nursing home where it could get stolen," Vanessa replied smoothly. I heard drawers opening and closing upstairs, followed by Marcus's footsteps on the landing. He appeared at the top of the stairs holding my wooden jewelry box, the one James had given me on our 5th anniversary, hand-carved with roses and filled with the few precious pieces I had collected over a lifetime. "I found it," he called down to Vanessa. "There's some nice stuff in here." "Good," she replied, her eyes never leaving my face. "Put it with our things, not hers. We'll keep it safe." "That's stealing," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Those are my personal possessions." Marcus paused, looking uncertain. "Mom, we're just protecting your valuables." "By taking them for yourselves?" I challenged. "Put my jewelry box back where you found it, Marcus. Right now." For a moment he hesitated, and I thought he might obey. Then Vanessa spoke up. "Marcus, don't listen to her. She's confused. You know that's why we're doing this. Her memory is getting worse. Last week she accused me of taking her reading glasses when they were on top of her head the whole time." "That never happened," I protested, appalled at how easily she invented lies. "See?" Vanessa said to Marcus. "She doesn't even remember. This is exactly why she needs professional care." Marcus nodded slowly, clutching my jewelry box tighter. "It's for your own good, Mom." As he descended the stairs with my precious memories in his hands, something inside me broke. This wasn't just about a house or possessions anymore. This was about dignity, respect, and justice. "No," I said, my voice finding new strength. "This has gone far enough. Marcus, put my jewelry down and get out of my house. Both of you, get out now." Vanessa laughed incredulously. "You're throwing us out? With what authority?" "With the authority of the person whose name is on the deed," I replied steadily. "This is my house, purchased with my husband's military pension. I've allowed you to live here out of love for my son, but that arrangement is now terminated." "Mom, be reasonable," Marcus pleaded. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my concern," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "You're both adults. Figure it out, just as I had to figure it out when your father died and I was left alone with a small child to raise." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful old woman! After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated incredulously. "You've lived in my house rent-free for 7 years. You've borrowed money from me countless times. You've belittled me, manipulated my son against me, and now you're trying to steal my possessions and ship me off to a nursing home. What exactly should I be grateful for, Vanessa?" "This isn't over," she hissed, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Put that jewelry in our room, Marcus. Now." As Marcus turned to obey, I picked up my phone again. "I'm calling the police. What you're doing is theft and elder abuse, and I will press charges." Vanessa's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You wouldn't dare. Think about what that would do to Marcus's reputation, his future." "You should have thought about that before you started this," I replied, my finger hovering over the dial button. For a tense moment, we stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then Vanessa suddenly lunged forward, knocking the phone from my hand. "Marcus!" she shouted. "Get her things, now!" What happened next was like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. Marcus dropped my jewelry box on the hall table and rushed upstairs, returning moments later with an armful of my clothes. Vanessa threw open the front door and began directing him. "Throw it all out on the lawn," she instructed. "All of it." "She wants us out?" "Fine, but we're taking this house." Marcus hesitated, looking at the bundle of my clothes in his arms. "Vanessa, I don't think—" "Don't think!" she snapped. "Just do it. She's called the police, Marcus. Do you want to go to jail? Do you want your mother to press charges against you? This is our only chance." Something in her frantic tone seemed to galvanize him. With a look of determination that broke my heart, Marcus strode to the front door and threw my clothes onto the front lawn. "Marcus, stop this!" I cried, trying to grab his arm as he passed me for another load. "This is insanity." He shook me off, his expression hardening. "You brought this on yourself, Mom. You're the one who refuses to accept help." As he disappeared upstairs again, I turned to Vanessa. "Is this what you call help? Throwing an elderly woman's possessions onto the street?" "Your place is in a nursing home with the old people," she snarled, pushing past me to grab a stack of my books from the living room shelf. "You've had your life. Now it's our turn." I watched in horror as my belongings, books I had cherished, clothes I had worn, photographs of my late husband, were thrown unceremoniously onto the front lawn. Neighbors began to appear on their porches, drawn by the commotion. When Marcus came downstairs with my medication bag, something inside me snapped. I ran to the phone in the kitchen and dialed 911. "Emergency services, what's your situation?" the dispatcher answered. "My name is Eleanor Washington," I said, my voice shaking. "My son and daughter-in-law are forcibly evicting me from my own home. They're throwing my possessions onto the street. I'm 74 years old, and I'm afraid they're going to physically remove me next." "Is anyone hurt, ma'am?" the dispatcher asked. "Not yet," I replied, watching as Marcus carried my favorite armchair toward the front door. "But I fear for my safety." "We'll send officers right away," the dispatcher assured me. "Stay on the line if you can." I kept the phone pressed to my ear as I moved to block Marcus's path. "The police are on their way," I told him. "Put my chair down, Marcus. This is your last chance to stop this madness." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then Vanessa appeared behind him. "She's bluffing," she said. "Keep going, Marcus. Once we get her out, we change the locks. It'll take her months to fight this legally, and by then we'll have established residence." Marcus nodded, his jaw set in a stubborn line I recognized from his childhood. But now it was turned against me. "Move, Mom," he said firmly. "I don't want to hurt you." "You already have," I whispered, but I stepped aside, unwilling to risk a physical confrontation. As they continued their frenzied evacuation of my possessions, I retreated to the kitchen, keeping the 911 dispatcher updated. Through the window, I could see more neighbors gathering, some taking videos on their phones, others approaching my scattered belongings with concerned expressions. "The officers are 2 minutes out," the dispatcher informed me. "Is the situation still nonviolent?" For now, I replied, watching as Marcus struggled to drag my mattress down the stairs. But they're becoming more agitated. Just as I said this, I heard sirens in the distance. Vanessa heard it too. She rushed into the kitchen, her face flushed with exertion and anger. "Hang up that phone," she demanded. "Hang it up right now." "No," I said simply, backing away from her. "This has gone far enough." What happened next would change all our lives forever. As sirens wailed in the distance, a fierce determination replaced my fear. I clutched the phone tightly, watching Vanessa's face contort with rage as she realized her plans were unraveling. "You stupid old woman!" she hissed, lunging toward me. "Give me that phone!" I backed away, keeping the kitchen island between us. "The police are almost here, Vanessa. It's over." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his arms full of my photo albums. His eyes widened at the sound of approaching sirens. "Mom, what have you done?" "What I should have done from the beginning," I replied steadily. "Called for help when people were trying to harm me." The flashing blue and red lights reflected through the kitchen windows as a police cruiser pulled up outside. Vanessa's face paled, her confident facade crumbling. "Marcus, we need to put everything back," she said urgently. "Quick, help me get her stuff back inside." But it was too late. There was a firm knock at the front door, followed by an authoritative voice. "Police, open up, please." Before either of them could move, I walked past Marcus and opened the door. Two officers stood on my porch. A tall man with salt and pepper hair, and a younger woman with alert, observant eyes. Behind them, I could see neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, watching the scene unfold. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call about a disturbance at this address," the male officer said. "Are you Eleanor Washington?" "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Thank you for coming so quickly. My son and daughter-in-law have been trying to force me out of my home. As you can see," I gestured to my belongings strewn across the lawn, "they've thrown my possessions outside." The officers exchanged glances as they took in the scene. The female officer stepped forward. "May we come in, Mrs. Washington?" "Of course." As they entered, Vanessa immediately adopted a concerned expression. "Officers, I'm so glad you're here. My mother-in-law has been extremely confused lately. We've been trying to help her move to an assisted living facility where she'll receive proper care." "That's not true," I countered firmly. "I am of sound mind and perfectly capable of caring for myself. This is my home. I own it outright. They've been living here as my guests, and when I refused to move to a nursing home, they began throwing my belongings out." The male officer turned to Marcus, who was still holding my photo albums. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably, not meeting the officer's eyes. "We're just trying to help my mother. She's getting older and—" "I'm 74, not 104, I interrupted. "And I don't need the kind of help that involves being forced out of my own home." The female officer, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, pulled out a notepad. "Mrs. Washington, whose name is on the deed to this house?" "Mine, Eleanor Marie Washington. I purchased it 38 years ago with my late husband's military pension." "And you've never transferred ownership or added anyone else's name to the deed?" "No, never. My lawyer, Walter Freeman, can confirm that." Officer Chen nodded, making notes. "And Mr. Washington, you and your wife live here as well?" Marcus nodded, still clutching my photo albums like a shield. "Yes, for about 7 years now." "Was that arrangement made with your mother's consent?" "Of course it was," he replied, an edge of defensiveness in his voice. "Mom invited us to stay while we saved for our own place. And now you're trying to move her out instead?" the male officer asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "It's not like that," Vanessa jumped in. "We're concerned about Eleanor's well-being. This house is too much for her to maintain. She needs professional care, Has a doctor recommended professional care? Officer Chen asked me directly. No, I replied firmly. I see my doctor regularly for routine checkups. I have mild hypertension that's well controlled with medication. That's it. I volunteer twice weekly at the community center, take Spanish classes at the local college, and maintain my own home and garden without assistance. The male officer glanced at the lawn strewn with my belongings. Then why are your possessions outside, Mrs. Washington? Because when I refused to go to the nursing home they'd arranged without my consent, they started throwing my things out. They even took my jewelry box, which contains heirlooms from my mother and gifts from my late husband. Officer Chen's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Washington, is this true? Did you remove your mother's jewelry from the house? Marcus looked trapped. I was just securing her valuables. Against her will? The officer pressed. Before Marcus could answer, we heard the sound of a car door slamming outside. Heavy footsteps approached the porch, followed by a commanding knock. The male officer opened the door to reveal my brother Jerome standing there in his full military dress uniform, his face set in stern lines that had once made junior officers tremble. General Jerome Thompson, United States Army, retired, he announced crisply. I'm here for my sister, Eleanor Washington. The officers straightened instinctively at his military bearing. Even Marcus took an involuntary step back, his face paling at the sight of his uncle in full uniform, ribbons and medals gleaming under the porch light. Jerome, I said. Relief washing over me. You made it. I caught the first flight out, he replied, crossing to embrace me briefly before turning to survey the room. His eyes lingered on Marcus, narrowing slightly. I see the situation hasn't improved. The police just arrived, I explained. I was giving them my statement. Jerome nodded to the officers respectfully. I apologize for interrupting. Please continue. Officer Chen resumed her questioning. Mrs. Washington, you mentioned a jewelry box. Can you describe it? It's wooden, hand-carved with roses on the lid. My late husband, Lieutenant Colonel James Washington, gave it to me on our 5th anniversary. It contains my mother's pearl necklace, my wedding ring, and several other pieces with deep sentimental value. The male officer turned to Marcus. Sir, where is this jewelry box now? Marcus glanced nervously at Vanessa, who had gone very still. It's upstairs, in our room. I'd like you to retrieve it, please, the officer said firmly. As Marcus disappeared upstairs, Jerome stepped closer to me. Are you all right, Ellie? Did they hurt you? Not physically, I replied softly. But I understand, he said, squeezing my hand. His eyes were full of the protective fury I remembered from childhood, when neighborhood bullies had learned the hard way not to mess with Jerome Thompson's little sister. Marcus returned with my jewelry box, reluctantly handing it to Officer Chen. She opened it carefully, revealing the contents. Mrs. Washington, is anything missing? I examined the contents, relief flooding through me as I counted each precious piece. No. Everything appears to be here. You're lucky, Jerome said to Marcus, his voice low and controlled. Theft over a certain value would have meant felony charges. Marcus flinched at the word charges, his eyes darting nervously between his uncle and the officers. We weren't stealing anything. We were protecting Mom's valuables. By taking them against her will? Jerome challenged. That's the textbook definition of theft, son. Vanessa, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. This is all a big misunderstanding. We genuinely want what's best for Eleanor. If she doesn't want to move to St. Catharines, that's fine. We can forget this whole incident and go back to normal. Normal? I echoed incredulously. You mean living together after you tried to force me out of my own home? After you threw my possessions onto the lawn? After you took my jewelry without permission? That kind of normal? The doorbell rang, interrupting the tense exchange. Officer Chen opened it to reveal Walter Freeman standing on the porch, his briefcase in hand. "I apologize for the delay, Eleanor," he said as he entered. "I came as soon as I received your message." "Thank you for coming, Walter," I replied, grateful for his steadying presence. "Mr. Freeman is my attorney," I explained to the officers. "He's been handling my legal affairs for over 30 years. Walter nodded to the officers, then turned his attention to the scene. My belongings scattered across the lawn, the jewelry box in Officer Chen's hands, Marcus and Vanessa looking increasingly cornered. "I see I've arrived at a critical moment," he observed. "Officers, I can confirm that Mrs. Washington is the sole owner of this property. I can also confirm that earlier today, Mrs. Vanessa Washington attempted to access information about Mrs. Eleanor's other properties without authorization." "Other properties?" Marcus blurted out, his shock evident. Walter raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Mr. Washington. Your mother owns 2 additional properties besides this residence, investments your father made before his death. Did you not know that?" The look on Marcus's face was answer enough. Vanessa, however, didn't seem surprised, just frustrated, as if a long-held suspicion had finally been confirmed. "I knew it," she muttered. "I knew you were hiding money." "I wasn't hiding anything," I corrected her. "I was private about my finances. There's a difference." Officer Chen finished making notes in her pad. "Based on what we've observed and the statements we've collected, there are potential grounds for charges of attempted elder abuse, harassment, and attempted theft. Mrs. Washington, do you wish to press charges at this time?" I hesitated, looking at Marcus, my son, my child, despite everything. The boy who had once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. The young man who had made me so proud at his college graduation. How had we come to this point? "I need time to consider my options," I said finally. "That's your right," the male officer acknowledged. "In the meantime, we need to address the immediate situation." He turned to Marcus and Vanessa. "I'm going to have to ask you both to gather your essential belongings and leave the premises tonight." "Leave?" Vanessa echoed incredulously. "This is our home. Actually, it's not," Walter corrected her gently. "You've been living here at Mrs. Washington's invitation, an invitation she is legally entitled to revoke at any time." "You're kicking us out?" Marcus asked, looking genuinely shocked. "Where are we supposed to go?" The irony of his question, so similar to what would have been my situation had their plan succeeded, was not lost on anyone present. "You should have considered that before attempting to evict your mother," Jerome said coldly. "Officers," Walter addressed the police, "my client would like Mr. and Mrs. Washington to remove their personal belongings and vacate the premises. They can arrange to collect any remaining items at a later date, with supervision." Officer Chen nodded. "We can monitor the removal of essential items tonight. For any remaining possessions, we can arrange a civil standby at a later date." "This is ridiculous!" Vanessa exploded. "We've lived here for 7 years. As guests," I reminded her, finding my voice again. "In my home." Jerome placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor will be staying with me tonight," he informed the officers, "until we can be certain her home is secure." Over the next hour, under the watchful eyes of the police officers, Marcus and Vanessa packed overnight bags. The tension in the house was palpable, broken only by the occasional directive from Officer Chen about what constituted essential items versus what would need to be collected later. While this was happening, Jerome and Walter helped gather my belongings from the lawn, returning them to the house with a care that brought tears to my eyes. Several neighbors joined in, murmuring words of support as they folded clothing and stacked books. "I'm so sorry this happened to you, Eleanor." Mrs. Peterson from next door said as she carefully picked up a framed photo of James that had been tossed onto the grass. "We should have noticed something was wrong sooner." "Thank you, Martha," I replied, touched by her kindness. No one could have predicted this. As we worked, Walter pulled me aside. "Eleanor, there's something you should know," he said in a low voice. "When you called me about Vanessa attempting to access information about your properties, I did some checking. There's evidence that she has a history of this kind of behavior." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, she was investigated in connection with a similar situation involving an elderly employer. The woman, Margaret Simmons, was a wealthy widow for whom Vanessa worked as a personal assistant. Charges were never filed, but there were allegations that Vanessa had isolated Mrs. Simmons from friends and family, gained control of her finances, and attempted to manipulate her will. The revelation left me cold. All this time, I'd thought Vanessa's behavior stemmed from her difficult childhood, from fear of poverty. But this suggested something far more calculated and predatory. "Does Marcus know?" I asked, dreading the answer. Walter shook his head. "I doubt it. The investigation didn't result in formal charges, so it wouldn't show up on a standard background check." "Should we tell him?" I wondered aloud, watching my son carry a suitcase down the stairs, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "That's your decision," Walter replied gently, "but it might help him understand that he's been manipulated as well." Finally, Marcus and Vanessa stood at the front door with their suitcases, ready to leave. Officer Chen handed Vanessa a card. "This has information about how to arrange a time to collect your remaining belongings," she explained. "You'll need to contact the department to schedule a civil standby." Vanessa took the card wordlessly, her expression a mixture of rage and humiliation. Marcus, however, hesitated at the threshold, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Mom," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "Not now, Marcus," I said quietly. "I need time." He nodded, his shoulders slumping even further, and followed Vanessa to their car. As they drove away, I felt a strange mixture of relief and profound sadness. My son, my only child, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, yet a part of me still loved him, still remembered the boy he had been. "Are you okay, Ellie?" Jerome asked, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I will be," I replied, straightening my spine. "I've survived worse." He smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You always were the strongest one in the family." After the officers left, with promises to follow up the next day, Jerome helped me pack an overnight bag. Though the immediate danger had passed, neither of us felt comfortable with me staying alone in the house so soon after the confrontation. "I've booked a suite at the Riverside Hotel," Jerome explained as we locked up. "My old army buddies are flying in tomorrow, David, Anthony, and Michael. They're retired now too, but once they heard what happened, they insisted on coming to help." "The cavalry's arriving," I said with a small smile, remembering how Jerome's friends had always treated me like a little sister during their visits home with James. "Exactly," he nodded. "No one messes with the Thompson family and gets away with it." As we drove to the hotel, I gazed out the window at the familiar streets of the neighborhood I'd called home for nearly 4 decades. Everything looked the same, and yet everything had changed. My own son had tried to push me out of my life to claim what he thought was his due. "Jerome," I said quietly, "do you think I failed as a mother? Where did I go wrong with Marcus?" My brother glanced at me, his expression softening. "Ellie, you were an exceptional mother. You raised that boy with love, taught him values, gave him every opportunity. This isn't about your parenting. It's about the choices he made as an adult and the influence Vanessa has over him." "Walter told me she has a history of targeting elderly people for their assets," I confessed. "He thinks Marcus may not know about her past." Jerome's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That wouldn't surprise me. Marcus always had a blind spot when it came to people he cared about. Remember how long it took him to realize that high school friend of his was stealing his lunch money? Despite everything, I found myself smiling at the memory. 3 months, and only after you sat him down with the evidence. Exactly. He sees the best in people, which is admirable but sometimes dangerous. Should I tell him about Vanessa's past? I asked. Jerome considered this as we pulled into the hotel parking lot. Let's get through the next few days first. There are more immediate concerns. Securing your home, updating your legal protections, deciding about pressing charges. Marcus's revelation can wait. That night in the comfort of the hotel suite, I sat on the balcony watching the city lights, my thoughts a tumultuous mix of betrayal, sadness, and uncertainty about the future. Jerome had gone to pick up some essentials from a nearby store, leaving me alone with my reflections. My phone rang, startling me from my reverie. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered cautiously. Mrs. Washington? This is Nurse Rivera from St. Catherine's Assisted Living Facility. The woman's voice was professional but kind. I'm calling because we have a room reserved in your name for tomorrow, but there seems to be some confusion about the arrangements. The audacity of it. After everything that had happened, the facility was still expecting me to arrive. There's no confusion, I replied firmly. I did not authorize that reservation. My son and daughter-in-law made those arrangements without my knowledge or consent. I will not be coming tomorrow or any other day. I see, she said, sounding genuinely concerned. Mrs. Washington, I should inform you that unusual circumstances around admissions sometimes raise red flags for us. Would you like to speak with our social worker about this situation? Her offer touched me. Here was a professional doing her job properly, recognizing potential signs of elder abuse and offering assistance. Thank you, but the situation is being addressed, I assured her. However, I would appreciate if you could tell me who paid the deposit for this reservation. Let me check, she said. There was a brief pause. It was paid by credit card in the name of Vanessa Washington. And how much was the deposit? I asked, a suspicion forming. Another pause. $3,000. The amount confirmed my suspicion. It was approximately the same amount Marcus had borrowed from me the previous month for what he claimed were car repairs. Thank you, I said. I would appreciate if you could make a note in your records that I did not consent to this reservation, and that any future attempts to arrange care for me should be verified directly with me. Absolutely, Mrs. Washington. And please know that we take elder welfare very seriously. If you need any resources or support, we're here to help. After hanging up, I made a note to tell Walter about this new information tomorrow. Every piece of evidence helped build a clearer picture of what Marcus and Vanessa had been planning. Jerome returned with shopping bags full of toiletries and comfortable clothes. I picked up some of those lavender bath salts you always liked, he said, unpacking his purchases. Thought you might want a relaxing soak tonight. His thoughtfulness brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, Jerome. He noticed my emotion immediately. What's wrong, Ellie? Did something happen while I was gone? I told him about the call from St. Catherine's and the $3,000 deposit. His expression darkened with each detail. So they used your own money to pay for removing you from your home, he summarized, his voice tight with anger. That's beyond manipulation. It's outright fraud. I just can't believe Marcus went along with it, I said, the pain of betrayal fresh again. My own son. Jerome sat beside me on the sofa, taking my hand in his. Ellie, I think we need to consider the possibility that Marcus has been as thoroughly manipulated as you were. From what Walter found about Vanessa's past, she's practiced at this kind of deception. She may have been working on Marcus for years, gradually reshaping his perceptions, isolating him from his support network, including you. and making him dependent on her for approval and direction. You think she's abusing him too? I asked, startled by the suggestion. Not physically, perhaps, but emotionally? Psychologically? It's possible. Control and isolation are hallmarks of abusive relationships, regardless of the genders involved. This perspective gave me pause. I'd been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't fully considered Marcus might also be a victim, albeit in a different way. If that's true, I said slowly, then pressing charges against him might just push him further into her control. Jerome nodded. It's something to consider, but your safety and well-being have to come first, Ellie. We can try to help Marcus see the truth, but we can't sacrifice your security in the process. That night I slept better than I expected, perhaps because for the first time in years, I felt truly protected. Knowing Jerome was in the next room, standing guard like he had when we were children, gave me a sense of peace that had been missing since James's death. Morning brought renewed clarity and determination. Over breakfast in the hotel restaurant, Jerome and I began to formulate a plan. First priority is securing your home, he said, methodically listing items on a notepad. New locks, security system, cameras. Is that really necessary? I asked. Absolutely, he replied without hesitation. Vanessa strikes me as the type who doesn't give up easily. We need to make sure she can't get back into your house without permission. I nodded, accepting his assessment. What about my legal situation? Walter's coming by at 9 to discuss options. We need to update your will, power of attorney, and advance directives to explicitly exclude Vanessa from any decision-making role. We should also consider setting up a trust for your assets. As if on cue, Walter arrived, looking dapper as always in his charcoal suit. He greeted Jerome warmly. They had known each other for decades, connected through James, before turning his attention to me. Eleanor, how are you holding up? He asked with genuine concern. Better than expected, I replied honestly, though I'm still processing everything. Understandable, he nodded, placing his briefcase on the table and extracting several folders. I've prepared some options for us to discuss today. Over the next hour, Walter outlined the legal steps we should take to protect my assets and ensure my wishes would be respected. He explained the differences between pressing criminal charges and pursuing civil remedies, and the potential consequences of each path. If you decide to press charges for elder abuse and attempted theft, Marcus and Vanessa could face serious legal penalties, he explained. However, there are alternatives that might achieve protection for you while potentially allowing for reconciliation down the road. What kind of alternatives? I asked. We could establish a legal framework that includes a restraining order against Vanessa while allowing Marcus limited, supervised contact if he agrees to certain conditions, perhaps counseling or education about elder abuse. We could require financial restitution as a condition of avoiding charges. I considered these options, torn between my desire for justice and my lingering love for my son. And what about my house? My assets? I recommend immediate steps to secure everything, Walter advised. Change the locks today, install a security system, revise your will, and advance directives. We should also consider establishing a trust with clear conditions for any inheritance Marcus might receive. What about Vanessa's history? Jerome asked. The previous case you mentioned. Could that be relevant to any legal proceedings? Walter nodded. Absolutely. It establishes a pattern of predatory behavior, which strengthens the case for both criminal charges and civil remedies. But it would destroy Marcus to learn that his wife has done this before, I said quietly. If this became public knowledge... He made his choices, Ellie, Jerome reminded me gently. I know, I sighed. But he's still my son. After breakfast, we met with Officer Chen at the police station to give my formal statement. The process was exhausting, recounting every detail of the previous day's events, as well as the patterns of behavior that had led up to it. Officer Chen was professional and compassionate, but nothing could ease the pain of formally accusing my own son of elder abuse. Based on the evidence and statements we've gathered, there are grounds for criminal charges, Officer Chen explained when we had finished. However, as the victim, your wishes carry significant weight. You're not required to decide immediately whether to press charges. Thank you, I said, grateful for the time to consider my options. Our next stop was my house, where a locksmith was already changing the locks under Walter's supervision. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed a small pile of my belongings still on the lawn, items that had been missed in yesterday's hasty cleanup. Jerome helped me collect them while Walter supervised the locksmith. As we moved through the house, I was struck by how different it felt, both familiar and strangely altered, as if the previous day's events had changed the very character of the space. In the living room, empty spaces on the bookshelves marked where Marcus and Vanessa had removed their belongings. In the kitchen, the mug Marcus had used every morning was missing from its hook. Upstairs, the door to what had been their bedroom stood open, revealing a partially emptied space. Drawers pulled out, closet door ajar, dust outlines where picture frames had once stood. They had clearly returned while we were at the police station and collected more of their things. They must have contacted the department to arrange a civil standby, Officer Chen explained when I mentioned it. It's standard procedure to allow people to retrieve their belongings peacefully. While Jerome discussed security measures with the locksmith, I sat on my bed, overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the past 24 hours. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the police involvement, it was almost too much to bear. But beneath the pain, I felt something else stirring, a quiet determination, a sense of justice restored. For too long, I had allowed Vanessa's manipulations to diminish me, to make me doubt my own capabilities. No more. A knock on my bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. It was Jerome. Ellie, the security company is here to install the new system. They need to know where you want the cameras. As I followed Jerome downstairs, I noticed my brother checking his watch. Expecting someone? I asked. He smiled. David, Anthony, and Michael's flight should be landing soon. They're coming straight here from the airport. Jerome, you didn't need to bring in the whole squad, I protested, though I was secretly touched by the show of support. Are you kidding? When I told them what happened, wild horses couldn't have kept them away. Besides, he added with a grim smile, there's nothing quite like the presence of 4 retired military officers to discourage any further trouble. While the security system was being installed, I busied myself setting my home back in order. Each item I returned to its proper place felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. The books back on shelves, the clothes rehung in closets, the family photos restored to their places of honor. I was arranging the last of these when I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw 3 men in crisp civilian clothes emerging from a taxi. Even without their uniforms, there was no mistaking the military bearing of Jerome's friends, David Reeves, Anthony Jackson, and Michael Harris, all retired now, but still carrying themselves with the discipline of their former ranks. I went to the door to greet them, touched by their immediate and decisive response to Jerome's call. These men had served with my late husband, had attended our wedding, had supported me after James's death. They were more than Jerome's friends. They were family. Eleanor, David said, enfolding me in a careful hug. It's been too long. You're looking well, David, I replied, genuinely happy to see him despite the circumstances. Anthony and Michael offered similar greetings, their concern evident beneath their smiles. As we moved into the living room, I could see them taking in the scene. The security technicians installing equipment, the new locks on the doors, the faint disorder that still lingered from yesterday's upheaval. Jerome filled us in on the situation, Anthony said once we were seated. Absolutely unacceptable behavior from your son and his wife. We're here to help however we can, Michael added. Just point us in the right direction. Thank you, all of you, I said, touched by their loyalty. Just having you here is a tremendous comfort. Jerome returned from showing the security technicians out. Systems all set up, he announced. 4 exterior cameras, motion sensors on all doors and windows, direct connection to the monitoring company and the local police department. Fort Knox has less security, David joked, though his eyes remained serious. Better safe than sorry, Jerome replied. Now let's talk strategy. Eleanor, Walter told me he's filing for a temporary restraining order against Vanessa. It should be approved by tomorrow. In the meantime, we're your security detail. You really think that's necessary? I asked. After what happened yesterday? Absolutely, Michael said firmly. People who are willing to throw an elderly woman's possessions onto the street and try to force her into a nursing home against her will aren't going to be stopped by a simple lock. I'm not exactly helpless, I reminded them, somewhat amused by being referred to as an elderly woman by men only a few years younger than myself. Of course not, Anthony agreed quickly, but there's no harm in having backup. As they discussed security rotations, apparently they had decided among themselves that I would not be left alone until the situation was resolved. I found myself reflecting on the stark contrast between these men and my son. Jerome, David, Anthony, and Michael embodied the values of honor, loyalty, and protection of the vulnerable that James and I had tried to instill in Marcus. Where had we gone wrong? The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Jerome moved to answer it, checking the new security camera feed on his phone first. It's Walter, he announced, opening the door to admit my lawyer. Walter entered, carrying his briefcase and a thick folder. Good news, Eleanor. The temporary restraining order against Vanessa has been expedited. It should be served by this evening. That was fast, I remarked, surprised by the speed of the legal system for once. Judge Hernandez takes elder abuse cases very seriously, Walter explained. Once I presented the evidence, including the police reports and witness statements from your neighbors, she issued the order immediately. What about Marcus? I asked. Is he included in the restraining order? Walter shook his head. Not at this point. I explained your concerns about him potentially being manipulated by his wife. The order is against Vanessa only. She must stay at least 500 feet from you and your property. Relief and sadness mingled in my heart. I wasn't ready to see Marcus yet, but excluding him from the restraining order left open the possibility of reconciliation someday. There's more, Walter continued, opening the folder. I've prepared updated documents for your review, a revised will, new power of attorney directives, and papers establishing a trust for your assets. Once these are signed and filed, your financial security will be significantly stronger. As we reviewed the documents, I was struck by the breadth of protection Walter had incorporated. Clauses specifically excluding Vanessa from any inheritance or decision-making capacity. Provisions requiring any financial support for Marcus to be administered through the trust rather than given directly. Even conditions regarding potential future reconciliation. This seems very thorough, I noted as I signed the last page. It is, Walter confirmed. I've incorporated every protection available under the law. Once these are filed, it would be extremely difficult for anyone to gain unauthorized access to your assets. As Walter prepared to leave, he pulled Jerome aside for a private conversation. Though they spoke in low voices, I caught fragments. Background check, previous incidents, pattern of behavior. When they finished, Jerome's expression was grim. What was that about? I asked after Walter had gone. Jerome hesitated, exchanging glances with his friends. Walter has found more information about Vanessa's past. It seems the incident with her elderly employer wasn't isolated. There was another case before that. Similar pattern, similar allegations, no formal charges. 2 previous victims, I murmured, the realization chilling me. And now me. Which confirms this isn't just about a difficult living situation, David added. This is a deliberate pattern of predatory behavior. The question is, what do we do with this information? Anthony asked. Do we tell Marcus? Would he believe it? Michael countered. Or would he see it as an attempt to drive a wedge between him and his wife? I considered the question carefully. The Marcus I had raised would have investigated such serious allegations objectively, weighing the evidence before reaching a conclusion. But the Marcus who had thrown my belongings onto the lawn yesterday, would he be capable of that kind of rational analysis when it came to Vanessa? I don't know if he'd believe it coming from us, I said finally, but he deserves the chance to learn the truth. Jerome nodded. We'll find the right moment. In the meantime, let's focus on keeping you safe and getting your life back in order. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. The men helped me reorganize my home, erasing the lingering traces of yesterday's chaos. We ordered dinner from my favorite Italian restaurant, and for the first time since the confrontation, I found myself laughing as they shared stories of their military days and updates on their families. As evening fell, Jerome insisted on staying the night, taking the guest room that had once been Marcus's childhood bedroom. The others checked into a nearby hotel, but promised to return early the next morning. You know, I said to Jerome as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I'm actually grateful for one thing about this whole terrible situation. What's that? He asked. It brought you back into my daily life. I've missed you, brother. He smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I've missed you too, Ellie. And I'm not going anywhere until I'm certain you're safe and this situation is resolved. As darkness fell, I found myself wondering what Marcus was doing at that moment. Was he reflecting on his actions? Regretting the choices he had made? Or was he further sinking under Vanessa's influence, convinced that I was the villain in this story? Tomorrow would bring new challenges, decisions about pressing charges, confronting the painful truth about Vanessa's past, rebuilding my life in the aftermath of betrayal. But for tonight, surrounded by the protective presence of people who truly cared for me, I allowed myself to believe that justice was possible, that healing could begin, and that perhaps someday my son might find his way back to the values I had tried so hard to teach him. What happened next would test us all in ways we couldn't yet imagine. The morning sun streamed through my bedroom window, casting golden patterns across the quilt James's mother had made for our wedding. For a moment, I lay still, savoring the peaceful quiet, so different from the tension that had filled this house during Vanessa's reign. It had been 3 weeks since the confrontation that changed everything, and slowly, I was reclaiming not just my home, but my sense of self. I rose, performing my morning ritual with deliberate care, making my bed with hospital corners the way my mother taught me, choosing clothes that made me feel confident rather than invisible, brewing a cup of tea in my favorite china cup. Small acts of self-determination that reminded me I was in control of my own life again. The doorbell rang just as I finished my tea. Through the security camera feed on my new tablet, a gift from Jerome, I saw my neighbor Martha Peterson standing on the porch with a covered dish in her hands. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said warmly when I opened the door. "I made too much banana bread yesterday and thought you might enjoy some." This was Martha's 3rd accidental baking surplus this week, part of the neighborhood's rallying support since the incident. The community grapevine had worked with astonishing efficiency. Within days, everyone knew what Marcus and Vanessa had tried to do, and the response had been overwhelming kindness. "Thank you, Martha," I said, genuinely touched. Would you like to come in for coffee? I'd love to, but I'm headed to my volunteer shift at the hospital, she replied. Rain check? Absolutely. After Martha left, I placed the banana bread on the kitchen counter and glanced at the calendar hanging by the refrigerator. Today marked a significant milestone, my appointment with Walter to finalize the establishment of the Eleanor Washington Living Trust. The legal structure would protect my assets and ensure they would be used according to my wishes, both during my lifetime and after. As I prepared to leave, my phone rang, Jerome calling for his daily check-in. Though he had returned to Colorado last week, along with David, Anthony, and Michael, he remained vigilantly involved in my recovery process. Morning, Ellie. How are you feeling about today's meeting? Ready, I replied, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. It's time to secure everything properly. That's my sister, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Call me when it's done. Walter's office embodied the stability and tradition I needed right now. Oak paneling, leather-bound law books, and the reassuring smell of paper and leather. He rose as I entered, greeting me with the formal courtesy that had characterized our professional relationship for 3 decades. Eleanor, good to see you. How are you holding up? Better each day, I replied honestly. The security system helps me sleep at night. Excellent, he nodded, gesturing for me to take a seat. I've prepared the final documents for your review and signature. Everything is arranged exactly as we discussed. For the next hour, we went through each document meticulously. The trust would hold all my properties and financial assets, with clear directives for their management. I would serve as the primary trustee while I was able, with Jerome named as successor trustee should I become incapacitated. The most difficult part had been the provisions regarding Marcus. After much soul-searching, I had decided to include him as a beneficiary, but with significant conditions. Any inheritance would be held in trust rather than distributed outright, protecting the assets from Vanessa's influence. Additionally, before receiving any benefits, Marcus would be required to complete counseling focused on elder abuse awareness. Are you certain about these conditions? Walter asked as we reached that section. They are legally enforceable, but they may further strain your relationship with your son. I'm certain, I said firmly. This isn't about punishment, it's about hope for change. Marcus needs to understand what happened and why it was wrong before he can benefit from my estate. Walter nodded, respecting my decision. And the provisions regarding Mrs. Vanessa Washington? Those remain unchanged, I confirmed. She is to receive nothing and have no decision-making authority regarding any aspect of my affairs. With the signing of the final document, a weight lifted from my shoulders. My assets were now protected, my wishes clearly established. Whatever happened next, I had secured my future. There's one more matter to discuss, Walter said as he carefully organized the signed papers. I've received a request from Marcus to meet with you. He's asked me to act as an intermediary. My heart skipped a beat. He wants to see me? Yes. He's proposed a meeting here at my office with me present as a neutral third party. I took a deep breath, considering the request. It had been 3 weeks since I'd seen or spoken to my son. The restraining order against Vanessa had been extended for 6 months, but Marcus had not been included in it. He'd made no attempt to contact me directly until now. Did he say why he wants to meet? He indicated he has information to share and... Apologies to offer, Walter replied carefully. I've known Marcus since he was a boy, Eleanor. He seemed genuinely remorseful. When would this meeting take place? He suggested tomorrow afternoon, but stressed that it should be at your convenience. Tomorrow. So soon. Was I ready to face my son after his betrayal? To hear whatever explanations or excuses he might offer? The wound was still fresh. the memory of him throwing my possessions onto the lawn still vivid in my mind. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Can I call you this evening with my decision?" "Of course," Walter assured me. "This should proceed only at your comfort level." As I drove home, my thoughts swirled with conflicting emotions. Part of me yearned to see Marcus, to understand how my loving son could have turned against me so completely. Another part feared being hurt again, having my trust shattered once more. At home, I sat in my garden, seeking clarity among the roses James had planted so many years ago. They were blooming profusely this year, as if celebrating my liberation from Vanessa's shadow. After much reflection, I called Jerome for advice. "He wants to meet with you." My brother sounded cautious. "Without Vanessa?" "Yes, at Walter's office. Walter would be present the entire time." "What does your gut tell you, Ellie?" I considered the question carefully. That I should hear what he has to say. He's still my son, Jerome, despite everything. I need to know if there's anything left of the boy I raised. "Then you should go," he said simply. "Just remember, protect your heart. Don't let guilt or manipulation cloud your judgment." With Jerome's counsel in mind, I called Walter to accept the meeting. "Tomorrow at 2 o'clock would be acceptable," I told him. "Please inform Marcus that I'll hear what he has to say, but I make no promises beyond that." That night, I prepared myself mentally and emotionally for the encounter. I selected my outfit with care. A navy blue dress that conveyed dignity without ostentation, pearl earrings James had given me on our first anniversary, and the silver bracelet Marcus had saved up to buy me for Mother's Day when he was 12. A reminder to us both of happier times. Sleep came fitfully, my dreams filled with fragments of the past. Marcus as a toddler, running to me with outstretched arms. As a teenager, rolling his eyes at my concerns but accepting my guidance. As a young man, proudly introducing me to his college friends. Had I truly lost that son forever? The next day dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself approved of this potential reconciliation. I spent the morning in quiet preparation, reviewing in my mind the boundaries I needed to maintain. I would listen, but I would not allow myself to be manipulated or guilted. I would be open to genuine remorse, but not to empty promises. At precisely 1:45, I arrived at Walter's office, my heart pounding despite my careful preparation. His assistant showed me to the conference room where Walter was already waiting. "Marcus hasn't arrived yet," he informed me. "Would you like some tea while we wait?" "Yes, thank you." As Walter arranged for tea, I took deep, calming breaths, centering myself for what was to come. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the passing minutes. 1:55, 1:58, 2 o'clock. At 2:05, Walter's phone buzzed. He excused himself to take the call, returning moments later with a perplexed expression. "That was my assistant. Marcus just called to say he'll be about 15 minutes late. Apparently there was some situation he needed to handle first." I nodded, tamping down my irritation. After all he had done, the least Marcus could do was be punctual for this meeting he had requested. At 2:23, the conference room door finally opened and Marcus entered, looking markedly different from when I'd last seen him. He had lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. His usually impeccable attire was slightly rumpled, and he carried a thick manila envelope clutched tightly in his hands. "Mom," he said softly, his voice catching on the single syllable. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I acknowledged him with a nod, maintaining my composure despite the rush of emotions his presence evoked. "Please, sit down," Walter directed, indicating a chair across the table from me. Marcus sat, placing the envelope carefully on the table before him. For a moment he simply looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of shame, anxiety, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Mom," he began again, his voice steadier now. "I know there's nothing I can say that will undo what happened. What I did, what I allowed to happen, is unforgivable. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here because you deserve the truth, and I finally found the courage to face it myself." He pushed the manila envelope toward me. "This contains evidence of what Vanessa has been doing, not just to you, but to others before you. Financial records, emails, text messages, documents she thought she'd hidden from me. It's all here." I glanced at Walter, who nodded slightly, indicating I should open the envelope. Inside were dozens of pages, bank statements, printed emails, photographs, and what appeared to be legal documents. "When the police and Uncle Jerome confronted us that day," Marcus continued, "it shook something loose in me. For the first time in years, I started questioning Vanessa's version of reality. After we left your house, we had a massive fight. She blamed me for not handling you better, for letting Uncle Jerome get involved. She said things that didn't make sense, about how we'd lost our chance at financial security, about how she'd have to start over with someone new." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. I started looking through her things while she was out. At first, I told myself I was just trying to understand what had happened. But what I found... His voice trailed off, heavy with emotion. "What did you find, Marcus?" Walter prompted gently. "Evidence that she'd done this before," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Twice. There were records of settlements, non-disclosure agreements, payments, and detailed notes about you, Mom, your routines, your finances, potential vulnerabilities she could exploit. It was all calculated, all planned from the beginning." I felt a chill run through me at the confirmation of what Walter had already discovered. "When did you realize this?" I asked, my first word since the meeting began. "It's been a process," Marcus admitted. "At first, I didn't want to believe it. I made excuses, told myself she must have had reasons. But the evidence kept mounting. 2 weeks ago, I confronted her with what I'd found. He swallowed hard. She didn't even deny it. She laughed and said I was too naive to understand how the world really works, that everyone takes advantage of the vulnerable, and only fools pretend otherwise." "Where's Vanessa now?" Walter asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Gone," Marcus replied, a mixture of pain and relief crossing his face. "She left last week, after emptying our joint bank account. She told me I was a failed investment and that she'd find someone more useful. The last I heard, she was heading to Arizona." I absorbed this information silently, feeling oddly vindicated yet deeply saddened for my son. Despite everything, I had never wanted him to experience this kind of betrayal and humiliation. "I've filed for divorce," Marcus continued, "and I've provided all this evidence to the police. They're reopening the investigations into her previous victims. They think there may be more than just the ones I found documentation for." He leaned forward, his eyes, so like his father's, meeting mine directly for the first time. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your trust. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way. After everything you've done for me, I let Vanessa manipulate me. But that's no excuse. I should have been stronger. I should have protected you." Tears filled his eyes, but he made no move to wipe them away. "I'm not asking to come back into your life. I just wanted you to know the full truth, and to tell you face to face how deeply sorry I am for the pain I've caused you." For several long moments I sat in silence, processing his words and the evidence before me. The meticulous planning, the calculated manipulation, it was all so much worse than I had imagined. Yet here was my son, broken but finally seeing clearly, taking responsibility for his actions without excuses or expectations. "Thank you for bringing this to me," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, for having the courage to face the truth and share it with me. "It's the least I could do," he replied. "You deserve to know." "What are your plans now?" I asked. "Where are you staying?" A flush of embarrassment crossed his face. "I'm staying at the Sunset Motel on Highway 16. It's all I can afford right now. I'm looking for a job, but—" He trailed off, the implications clear. His association with Vanessa's scheme had damaged his reputation in the community. "I see," I said, considering this information carefully. "And the divorce proceedings?" "My lawyer says it should be straightforward, given the circumstances. Vanessa hasn't contested anything. She's already moved on to her next target." The word seemed to cause him physical pain. Walter, who had been observing our exchange with professional neutrality, spoke up. "Marcus, may I ask what you hope will come from this meeting? What outcome are you seeking?" Marcus looked startled by the question. I don't expect anything, Mr. Freeman. As I said, I'm not asking for forgiveness or for Mom to let me back into her life. I just felt she deserved the truth and an honest apology, face to face." Walter nodded, then turned to me. "Eleanor, do you have any other questions for Marcus at this time?" Did I? There were 1,000 things I wanted to ask, to understand. How could he have believed Vanessa over me? How could he have participated in throwing my belongings onto the lawn? How could he have forgotten everything I'd taught him about respect and dignity? But I sensed those questions would lead us into painful territory that neither of us was ready to navigate fully. "Not today," I replied. "I need time to process all of this." "Of course," Marcus said quickly, already rising to leave. "Thank you for hearing me out, Mom. I'll go now." As he turned toward the door, something in his defeated posture, so unlike the confident son I'd raised, pierced through the protective shell I'd built around my heart. "Marcus," I called, my voice softer than before. He turned, hope and wariness mingling in his expression. "I'm not ready to have you back in my home," I said honestly. "The trust between us has been broken, and it will take time to rebuild if that's even possible. But—" I paused, searching for the right words. "I appreciate your honesty today, and I'm sorry that Vanessa betrayed you too." A single tear escaped, tracking down his cheek. "Thank you," he whispered. "That's more than I deserve." After he left, Walter and I sat in contemplative silence for several minutes. "What are your thoughts, Eleanor?" he finally asked. I sighed, looking at the envelope of evidence Marcus had provided. I believe he's genuinely remorseful, and I believe he was manipulated by Vanessa, though that doesn't excuse his actions. "Do you want me to review this material?" Walter asked, indicating the envelope. "Please, I'd like your professional assessment of what it contains." As Walter began examining the documents, I gazed out the window at the bustling street below, watching people move through their daily lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in this quiet conference room. How strange that the most profound moments of our lives often occur in such ordinary settings, not on mountaintops or ocean shores, but in hospital rooms, kitchen tables, and lawyers' offices. "Eleanor," Walter's voice interrupted my musings, "this is quite significant. There's evidence here that could potentially lead to criminal charges against Vanessa, not just for what she attempted with you, but for her previous victims as well." "What about Marcus?" I asked, the question that had been weighing on my mind since the confrontation. Walter considered carefully. "Based on what I'm seeing here, and his cooperation with the authorities, it's unlikely he would face serious charges. He appears to have been manipulated, though as he himself acknowledged, that doesn't eliminate his responsibility." I nodded, mulling over the implications. "I need to think about next steps, Walter. This changes things, but I'm not sure yet how I want to proceed." "Of course," he agreed. "Take all the time you need. The restraining order against Vanessa remains in effect, and your trust is now established. You're protected, Eleanor, legally and financially." As I drove home, Marcus's revelations played through my mind on repeat. The calculated nature of Vanessa's scheme was chilling, but what disturbed me most was how effectively she had isolated and manipulated my son, a grown man with a good education and what I had believed was a strong moral compass. It was a sobering reminder of how vulnerable we all are to psychological manipulation from those we trust. At home, I called Jerome to share what had transpired. "So Vanessa's done this before," he said grimly when I'd finished recounting the meeting. "I'm not surprised, but it's still disturbing to have it confirmed." What surprised me was Marcus coming forward with the evidence, I admitted. I wasn't sure he'd ever see through her manipulation. "What are you feeling about him now, Ellie?" I considered the question carefully. Complicated things. Relief that he finally recognizes what happened. Sadness for his pain. Anger still for his betrayal. And a cautious hope that maybe, someday, we might rebuild some kind of relationship. "That sounds healthy," Jerome approved. "You're not rushing to forgive and forget, but you're leaving the door open a crack. That's all anyone could expect at this point." "He's staying at that awful motel on Highway 16, I found myself saying. The one with the flickering neon sign. Jerome was silent for a moment. "Are you thinking of offering him alternative accommodations?" "No," I said quickly. "I'm not ready for that. But I hate the thought of him there, alone after everything that's happened." "That's because you're a mother, Ellie. A good one. Even when your child hurts you deeply, you still care about their welfare. It's who you are." After we hung up, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The same colors had graced the sky the day Marcus first came home with me from the adoption agency, tiny and perfect in my arms. Despite everything, that memory remained untarnished, a moment of pure joy and love that could never be taken from me. The next morning I awoke with a clearer sense of how I wanted to proceed. Not with blind forgiveness that ignored the harm done, but with cautious steps toward healing, both for myself and, potentially, for my relationship with Marcus. My first action was to call Walter and authorize him to share the evidence Marcus had provided with the appropriate authorities. Vanessa needed to be stopped before she could target another vulnerable person. My second call was to Officer Chen, informing her that I would not be pressing charges against Marcus, though I would cooperate fully with any investigation into Vanessa's activities. The third call was the hardest, to Marcus himself. Walter had given me his new cell number just in case, though he'd assured me I was under no obligation to use it. The phone rang 4 times before Marcus answered, his voice cautious. "Hello?" "Marcus, it's your mother," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Mom?" he breathed, surprise evident in his voice. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. I've been thinking about our meeting yesterday," I began. "I want you to know that I've asked Walter to share the evidence you provided with the authorities. Vanessa needs to be held accountable for her actions." "I agree," he said softly. "Thank you." I took a deep breath before continuing. "I also wanted to let you know that I won't be pressing charges against you. What happened between us will take time to heal, if it can be healed at all. But I don't believe that legal proceedings would help either of us move forward." "Thank you," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "That's more than I deserve." "It's not about what you deserve, Marcus," I replied honestly. "It's about what I need to move forward with my life. Pursuing charges against my own son would only bring more pain, not healing." There was a pause filled with unspoken words and emotions. Finally, Marcus asked, Is there anything I can do to start making amends?" I considered his question carefully. "Time and space," I answered. "I need those first, but there is one thing you could do in the meantime. Anything, he promised quickly. The counselor who runs the support group for victims of elder abuse at the community center, Dr. Rivera, also offers a program for family members who have participated in or witnessed such abuse. It helps them understand the dynamics and patterns and how to break them. Would you consider attending? There was no hesitation in his response. Yes, absolutely. I'll contact Dr. Rivera today. Good, I said, feeling a small weight lift from my heart. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step towards something new, something that acknowledged the pain of the past while creating space for potential healing. Mom, Marcus said hesitantly, may I ask how you're doing? Are you okay? The question touched me with its simple concern. I'm healing, I told him truthfully. Each day gets a little easier. I'm reclaiming my life, my home, my sense of self. I'm glad, he said, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. You deserve that peace. After we hung up, I sat in my garden again, among James's roses. I thought of all we had weathered together. James's death, the challenges of raising a child alone, financial uncertainties, health scares. Through it all, I had maintained my dignity and independence, my faith in myself and my abilities. Vanessa had tried to strip that away, to reduce me to a helpless old woman who could be discarded when convenient. Marcus had allowed himself to become her instrument, betraying the values I had worked so hard to instill in him. The pain of that betrayal would not vanish overnight, nor should it. Some wounds need time to heal properly, without being rushed or minimized. But as I sat there, feeling the warm sun on my face, I realized that I had emerged from this ordeal not diminished, but strengthened. I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. I had reclaimed my power, secured my future, and set boundaries that honored my worth. Whether Marcus and I would eventually rebuild our relationship remained to be seen. That journey would require work from both of us, genuine remorse and changed behavior from him, a willingness to risk trusting again from me. It was a path we would have to navigate day by day, step by careful step. For now, I was content to focus on my own renewal. At 74, I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant during Vanessa's reign. My love of gardening, my interest in Spanish literature, my talent for watercolor painting. I was reconnecting with neighbors and friends, strengthening the community ties that Vanessa had systematically weakened. Most importantly, I was reclaiming my voice, the confident voice that knew its own worth, that wouldn't be silenced or dismissed because of age or gender. The voice that had called for help when I needed it, that had stood firm against manipulation and abuse. That evening, as twilight softened the edges of my garden, I made a decision. I would convert Marcus's old bedroom, the room that had later become Vanessa and Marcus's space, into a studio for my painting. It would be a visible symbol of my reclamation, transforming a space associated with betrayal into one of creativity and joy. As I planned the renovation in my mind, soft green walls, an easel by the window to capture the morning light, shelves for art books and supplies, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever happened with Marcus, whatever the future held, I would face it on my own terms, with the dignity and resilience that had carried me through 74 years of life's joys and sorrows. I was Eleanor Washington, widow, mother, artist, survivor. And I was not done living yet, not by a long shot.